Get this official. So we are now recording and we are off. So thank you everybody for joining us here at the final session of the first season of the Ward 3 Neighborhood Series. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to session 9, which is Deliberate Strategies for Inclusivity. I am going to go ahead and share my screen to show everybody the agenda. I will share this with you in the chat as well. So welcome. Some quick Zoom housekeeping. Please, if you're not speaking, go ahead and mute yourself just so that we can limit background noise and reverberations. And right after this, I will turn it over to our brand new council member for Ward 3, Karen Ulick. And then I will have Ernesto Portillo introduce our speakers, who are Leanne Hernandez, Julia Munson, Sadie Shaw, Josue Aparicio, and you'll correct me in your pronunciation, so my apologies there, and Nicole Snook. So without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Councilmember Karen Ulick.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everybody. I really just wanted to say thank you, particularly to the Ward 3 staff. I'm so grateful and excited that the team is going to continue their service, and this is an example of, I think, their commitment and great work. So thanks for that. And also appreciate our presenters this evening and throughout the series. This topic in particular is so important, and I was so glad to see it as the focal point. And and also thanks for everybody for investing time in making Ward 3 and Tucson a better place. So I want to save all the time for content, and I'll turn it back over to Matt, but thanks everybody very much. And I know Sarah and I have to leave early, I'm sure it'll be a great session. So thanks everybody.
All right, yeah, thank you, Karen. And as you can imagine, Karen, her first week on the job, she's getting up to speed. So thank you for stopping by. Next, since we have a lot of people and we have a lot of presenters and topics, I'm going to go ahead and ask everyone to just go ahead and put your name and your neighborhood in the chat. That way we know where we can connect a name and a location. So I know sometimes we're able to do sort of the popcorn introductions, but because of the fullness of the agenda, I will leave it there. So now I will, before we turn it over to our first speaker, I'm going to ask Ernesto in our office to just do a quick intro on our speakers for this evening.
Thanks, Matt. Welcome, everyone. In some parts of the city, we call this a party. But yeah, we're excited to present this topic this evening of inclusivity. It is, of course, for many people and in Ward 3, an urgent matter to deal with, to address. And in this evening's conversation, we invited 5 members of our community to talk about inclusivity for the neighborhoods from different perspectives. So we invited Leanne Hernandez from the YWCA located in Menlo Park, who will start off and frame the conversation for us. Why are we having this discussion? She'll be followed by Julia Munson of the International Refugee Committee, who will talk about our refugee friends and neighbors. Sadie Shaw, former president of the Sugar Hill Neighborhood Association and current member of the Tucson Unified School Board, will talk about engaging the long-time residents who, for different reasons, have disengaged, and the attempts to bring them back into the neighborhood association and activities. Josue Aparicio brings to us the perspective of an apartment complex manager, and he'll give us some ideas, some suggestions. How can neighborhood associations gain access to the apartment complexes? And we'll finish off with the wonderful Nicole Snook. You're all wonderful, but Nicole Snook, who has been participating with us these past few weeks. In a similar vein, like Josue, she's going to talk about mobile home residents, and she's from the Flowing Wells neighborhood. So that's it here. Start off, Leanne, who has the bomb background. You're up. And
Leanne, you are
Are
unmuted.
you with us? You're unmuted.
Okay. Hi. Sorry, I'm working on my computer and sound off my phone, so I'm a little bit confused right now. I apologize. So thank you so much for having me in your space, y'all. My name's Leanne Hernandez, and I work with the YWCA, and I lived in Tucson since 1990. I'm really committed to this place that we call home. So I have prepared a little slideshow because that's what we do in nonprofits. But Matt, I'm not sure if you want to give me sharing, or I can just talk either way.
Oh, absolutely. I will do that right now.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Well, anyway, I'm really excited to be in this space, and I know that we don't have a lot of time. So I really want to just start by having, just some introduction. My name's Leanne Yen, and my family's been in Arizona for the last 4 generations, and we come from Miami, Arizona, in the Copper Belt, and so yeah, I think it's really important that we remember that we share these sacred spaces that we call home with a lot of history and with a lot of folks. And so I just wanted to frame, who I am as part of the conversation. Like I said, I work at the YW. I've been there since 2013, and I work as part of a staff, a larger staff of about 14, but in my particular center, we have 4 folks who work with a small army of volunteers around issues of domestic violence and education. We also do workforce preparation and inclusion work. We have the Pima County Teen Court. We run a small center in the city of South Tucson called House of Neighborly Service. And I also oversee the Women's Counseling Network. So we do a lot of different work down at the YW, and I invite you all to visit whenever you have the chance. But to the subject at hand, I wanted to engage you all actually in a conversation because I think that it's really important that we know that we all carry this knowledge within us, and that it's not so much about me bestowing all this information upon you and you don't know anything about it, but I think that we all carry a lot of ideas and a lot of important knowledge about what we're talking about today, which is inclusion. And so I want to invite you all to unmute as you see fit and answer the question, what is inclusion to you? And I just want to kind of popcorn it a little bit for a couple minutes. So who's going to be brave and go first? Anyone? Come on, y'all. I know your neighborhood. Yeah, go ahead.
One of my inclusion practices lately is to not be the first one to speak all the time and make space for others, but I still have to do it. So making space for other people, not only to be represented, but to be heard, to be understood, and to be respected.
Yeah, thank you, Sergio.
It will be the last time I speak first.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for breaking the ice, though, Sergio. I appreciate you. And I can't read the chat. I apologize. I can't read the chat and present at the same time. So I'm going to invite you all just to jump on in. Let's have a conversation.
Hi, this is Vicki France, and I live in Palo Verde. And I'm here to learn what inclusion is because I'm an old white woman and I've led a very sheltered life. So I need to learn how to include other people in it.
Okay. All right, I hear you. And also, Vicki, I'm gonna invite you to recognize that you do know what inclusion is, and right, it's about making space for folks and inviting them, however they show up, into spaces. And so I know that you must have friends, and so I think that you do have inclusive practices. Maybe they have a different language, but we all know these things. So thank you so much for chiming in. I appreciate that. Who else wants to answer? What is inclusion to you?
Hey, this is Mike in Tucson House. It took me a while to think about what inclusion is to me or means to me, but then I put it to my current status, current situation. It's just a matter of I describe it as turning on my radar, looking around, see who's there, who's not there, um,
Mhm.
or could try to consider who's not there, and
Right,
then think it through.
right. Okay, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. We'll take one more. Who else has something to share? I see something in the chat, but I can't read it. I apologize.
Sarah said, lovely comment, Sergio.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. So here's the real question, right? Is that how can we have this conversation about what inclusion is and why would we use it as a framework for doing our neighborhood work? You all beyond, are experts in this area. You all are committed to your neighborhoods. You want to do good work. And so I think it's important that as we work together, right, as community members, as fellow neighbors, that we remember that we can bring a certain feeling to being in the community, right? We can be inclusive. We can invite people to the parties. We can invite people to offer their opinions and expertise and knowledge about whatever it is that we're doing. And so I think it's about not just thinking about inclusion as something that we have to do over here, right? But it is the center of how we engage in our neighborhood and in our community work. That's how I imagine inclusion as a framework. So why are we having this question? I can give you a business analysis as to why inclusion and diversity is important, but at the end of the day, what the data bears out and what we know to be true, right, and just in our experience as fellow neighbors, is that we get better answers or results by being more inclusive. The more folks we have around the table, the more expertise, the more wisdom, the more knowledge, the more perspective we will have in order to make better ask better questions to get better answers. I think that in the context of our neighbors and our neighborhoods and our wards, if you will, but just in our communities in general, we increase our knowledge and our experience of this place that we all share and call home, right? And we develop better strategies for doing our work. But what else can we get and gain by being more inclusive in our community building? What do y'all think?
I have a thought. This is Ellen Parrish.
Yeah, Christina, go ahead, please. Thanks. Yeah, go ahead.
You've probably all heard this, but it's there. I saw some scientific study where if you're in pain and you share your pain, it cuts the extent and the drama of the pain in half. And if you're experiencing joy and you share your joy, it doubles your joy. So the more community building we can do, the better we can be. We all benefit. It elevates all of us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ellen. I appreciate that. And Christina, you wanted to jump in? Go ahead, please.
Yes, hi, thank you. So one thing that I've learned with inclusion is I work with Ishkashita Refugee Network. And I know you probably know of Ishkashita. And the thing that I've learned is a deep respect for refugees that come into our country, just what they have to go through to get here. And then once they get here, once they feel safe and they really start showing you their culture, it is just a magical moment. And so by being inclusive, we learn other cultures, we learn other foods, and it's just a different perspective that we get. And we find out that we're so much alike, even as our differences can show, but we're so much alike, and we can gather over a plate of food, a conversation. I had some amazing coffee from Eastern Africa that was just wonderful. So just learning different cultures, I think, is also really important in inclusion.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. So I know that the time is getting really tight, but I wanted to just share with you some of my thoughts about how we can be more inclusive. First, we need to be really clear about what our motivations are. Are we inviting people to the table just because we don't have X people represented? Are we just trying to check the box? Or do we actually want to do some deep dives into our blind spots, what we might not know, having curiosity about other perspectives. And we need to be really honest about why we're doing this work, right? That it's important that we have a greater understanding of who is living in our communities, what kind of needs they might have, what kind of solutions they might bring to the table as well. And in that, and again, like this is a lot kind of condensed into a little bit of time, but we also need to recognize that we as individuals bring a lot to the table. And that includes also some bias and some assumptions, right? That we might need to work on our own. And so that there's a lot of individual and group learning that can happen as we become more and more inclusive. I think that it's important that we see inclusion not just as a box that we tick, as a goal that we've accomplished for the year by doing one session, but really as a practice that we engage in as we do community-based work. So that we work across difference, which is the critical thing, but that we also recognize and are open to the learning. One thing that I always find in sessions is that folks are really frightened of making mistakes, and that really keeps them from being genuine in their engagement. And so I just want to invite you to, be willing to make a mistake, be willing to make the apology when we make mistakes, and know that we can only grow from that if we engage in that work wholeheartedly. I think we don't always share a vocabulary to have difficult conversations, but that shouldn't preclude us from having them and engaging in a practice, because ultimately we will make better solutions and create a better space for the future. And then I just want to acknowledge also, in particular, when we're talking about difference, that we need to name things, right? And so I want to say that when we're talking about especially issues around race, that there's a lot of pain and it's difficult, but it's not unsurmountable, right? And that we need to have those conversations. If anything from the last year has shown us that we need to have the capacity for having greater engagement and doing deeper work around race and gender and poverty, honestly, as well. And so I just wanted to end this session, this brief session, with just saying that you know how to do this, right? We all want to feel a sense of belonging and safety. That is a universal. We as humans also need one another. We're social creatures by nature. And so, we can grow the capacity to do better, and we can do that together. So I know this has been really, really brief, and I'm sorry if I went really fast, but I just wanted to make sure that we have a basic understanding of inclusion. And if you're interested in learning more, please, right now we're doing a 21-day racial equity and social justice challenge at the YW. I invite you to get in, and I invite you to the table. Thank you so much for being here, y'all. I really appreciate your leadership.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leanne. Leanne, someone asked how they can get a copy of your PowerPoint presentation. If you have a link, could you put it in the chat? And again, just to emphasize Leanne's invitation, if you haven't, please visit the YW online, and when it reopens, please go down to Menlo Park. A lot of wonderful people there and activities. Next up, Julia Munson, a resident of Ward 3, right, Julia?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from the International Refugee Committee. Julia, bienvenida. Gracias for being with us.
Thank you all so much for having me. So my name is Julia Munson. I am the New Roots Program Coordinator at the IRC here in Tucson, and I am a Mountain First resident. I've lived in Tucson for about 7 years and worked at the IRC for 4. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And so the IRC is an international humanitarian aid organization here in Tucson. Our primary role is to support refugees and asylees throughout their resettlement to and integration in the Tucson community. And as a New Roots program coordinator, I coordinate our food security work, nutrition education, and agriculture programs, including 2 garden sites in Ward 3. One at Literacy Connects and one at Satori School. So before I jump into best practices for outreach, I just wanted to give a brief intro to who refugees and asylees are. And I'll also include a link in the chat when I finish to Refugee 101 training, in case any of you would like to learn some more. So refugee and asylee are both immigration statuses with specific legal definitions, and both refugees and asylees undergo extensive interviews and security reviews to qualify as refugees and asylees. So refugees are people who have crossed an international border and cannot return to their country of origin due to persecution or a legitimate fear of death, injury, or persecution because of war, race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. And it's important, I think, to note that less than 1% of refugees worldwide are offered the opportunity to resettle in a third country, such as the United States. And then an asylee is a person who meets the definition of refugee and is already present in the United States or sought admission at a port of entry. So last year, IRC Tucson served refugees and asylees from 19 countries, including the Democratic Republic of Congo, Afghanistan, Venezuela, and Somalia. So I say that in part because when we're talking about making connections to and outreach to refugee and asylee and other immigrant communities, there's no one size fits all approach that's going to work for everyone. Refugees, asylees, and other immigrants have varied lived experiences, have diverse skills, interests, and connections to their communities. So really multi-pronged outreach efforts work best. And most importantly, I think just be welcoming, flexible, patient, and open-minded. And those things will get you pretty far when it comes to making connections with people. One thing I would encourage is to find out what languages are common in your neighborhood, and whenever you're translating or whenever you're doing outreach via flyers or other documents, to try and get those translated, especially into languages that are very common in your communities. You can, usually your schools and your neighborhood schools will have a good sense of what languages are spoken, as well as churches and other community organizations. I know from conversations with Ampi High School that they have 30 plus languages spoken at the school. Obviously, you may not be able to translate something into 30 languages, but if you can really target to figure out what are the most common languages in your neighborhood, what are the languages of people who are already interested in and excited about what you're doing, and try and get those translated. There is a free app called Tarjimly. I'll put it in the link when I finish, or in the chat when I finish, primarily aimed at refugees and also humanitarian aid organizations, but provides free interpretation and translation. I would also recommend, if you're ever, writing a proposal for funding, to consider writing in even just a small amount in your budget for translation and interpretation. That way, you know, you're making sure that you're giving yourself the space to be able to translate flyers and provide interpretation. I would note that Google Translate is something I would mostly avoid, especially for purposes of translation, unless you then have someone else who can take a look at it for clarity, because there are often a lot of mistakes. However, I have found it helpful if you're ever in a brief conversation with someone, you're communicating something simple and you don't have access to an interpreter, that Google Translate can be a helpful app on your phone for those moments, especially because it does have the ability to translate spoken words. And that can be really helpful if you're working or talking with someone who is pre-literate in English or in their own language. On that note, I would encourage, if possible, along with translation, to also use a lot of images in any documents you're creating, because like I was saying, refugees have wide variety of lived experiences. Some people have advanced degrees and some people will have maybe never been to school, and so may not read or write in their own language. On a similar note, I would also suggest using more than just email to communicate with people. Similarly, refugee and immigrant communities vary widely in terms of digital literacy. We in our program use WhatsApp a lot because it's an app that's pretty familiar with many of the people that we're working with. You can use text or voice messages, and you can also make phone calls through WhatsApp, but you can also try Facebook and other social media. But once you establish a relationship with people, once you've made that initial connection, I would say that calling people, while time consuming, is often one of the most effective ways to get people to show up and be interested in working with you. Which kind of ties in to my next point, which is just that building relationships and trust is going to be essential here, and that takes time, and that's okay. You know, try to connect with community leaders, different, you know, if you connect with community leaders at community centers, gathering areas, other organizations, churches, businesses, and apartment complexes, and if you, you know, put in the work to develop partnerships and really get to know people, and that way people will be more likely to encourage their friends and family and community to join, especially if they're recognizing the value of the work and feel like their voices are being heard. When it comes to having events or meeting with people in person, definitely try to ask people what meeting times work best for them and accommodate them as much as possible. I know this can be hard, but people's work schedules are all over the place. People have kids to take care of. So sometimes if we can kind of try and figure out what times work best for the most people, that's more likely to get people to show up. Also consider providing food and childcare. And if you aren't able to provide childcare, be okay with kids being around and maybe consider having an activity for them. And then if you can offer interpretation, I would highly encourage you to do that, again, especially in common languages in your neighborhood. I would avoid using family members, especially kids, if you can, to interpret. Kids often end up being asked to interpret for their parents a lot. And so, we do try to encourage people to use trained interpreters or community members who are volunteering rather than looking to kids to interpret if possible. And if you are working with a trained interpreter, try to prepare the interpreter ahead of time. Make sure they know what you're going to talk about so they can be ready to fully communicate everything. And I also, one thing I've noticed that's been helpful, especially if you're working with a group of people, some of whom who will need interpretation and maybe some people who aren't familiar with interpretation, is just to explain how interpretation works, that you'll be using it, the purpose of interpretation at the outset of a meeting. And this helps make sure everyone feels welcome and just addresses any concerns people might have regarding interpretation. And then kind of, as I said before, be friendly and welcoming when you're meeting in person. Take time for introductions. Again, that relationship building is key. And so even if it feels like that's taking up a lot of time in your meeting, I think it's worth it. And it makes people feel like they're heard and they'll be more likely to show up in the future. And finally, be flexible about your meeting setup and your agenda. I found when I can let go of having a really strict structure or be willing to let it shift, I found that those are the more productive meetings, especially because people might not always show up on time. Interpretation can take longer than you planned for. And sometimes you might find a topic you thought would be 5 minutes is something that attendees are really wanting to discuss. And if you can, allow them the space then or plan another time and venue to do so, but do make sure that something that's engaging people is followed through on, and that people have that space. So I think that's all for me. Thanks for taking the time to listen.
Julie, thank you so much. All right, I appreciate it. I saw there was one comment in the chat, or question, excuse me, in the chat. Already the speakers / agencies available to directly assist neighborhoods. If you, Julia or Leanne, and then everybody else, if you're willing, go ahead and put any contact information in the chat for people who might have follow-up questions. So, we appreciate you first taking your time out for this. So thank you. So next up we have from Sugar Hill, Sadie Shaw, TUSD, as well as a TUSD governing board member. So Sadie, if you are ready, go ahead and take it away.
Hello, everyone. How is everyone doing? I know we're all on mute, so I'm assuming you're doing well. As you know, I'm Sadie Shaw, former president of Sugar Hill Neighborhood, and also recently elected governing board member to TUSD. So happy to be here. Thank you to Neto for reaching out to me. Ward 3 is a place very close to my heart, of course, because of Sugar Hill, obviously. And also, I went to Amphi High School. And so, I've been running around Ward 3 for all my life. So, it's, I care about it and I want to see it move forward in a good way. So happy to see that we're all here to do that job. So yeah, I guess I'm here to talk about how to get your historic residents to, I don't know, be tapped in a little bit more. And I think really where, what is key is to have representatives from the historic, as have representatives who are historic residents, you know what I mean? Because if obviously it's not impossible to get historic residents to participate, but I think having a leader or a group of leaders along with like new residents who are really stewarding, whether it's an association or like an organization that works in the neighborhood. Having a historic resident there helps to make it less of like a performance or like a gesture, or you know what I mean. If you have someone who like really knows what's up, I guess like reaching out to the historic residents will seem more authentic. And so, yeah, that was like my main focus as president of Sugar Hill. I wanted to obviously, um, bring back the historic side of the neighborhood and make it more visible. I think what we wrote here in the email about, bringing long time residents back to their neighborhood roots, I feel like that's a little erroneous because, historic residents have always been connected to their roots, but what we lack is people recognizing us or being remembered. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, but my first order of business as president was really to like change the name of the neighborhood from Northwest to Sugar Hill. But of course, for those who were in the neighborhood back in the 80s, 90s, and even before, like Northwest still does carry a lot of historic weight because Donald Liggins Center used to be called Northwest, and so if you're a historic resident, you probably are referring to the center as Northwest Center, like I do. So yeah, having neighborhood projects that speak to the history of the residents, I think is key. The way I got involved in the neighborhood association was actually through the Bronx Wash murals. And I wasn't like, when I was painting the mural, I wasn't like even tapped into the neighborhood association. I was just actually invited by Michael Schwartz, who like worked with the association to like put on the mural fest, and he like invited me to the one and only meeting of that year. And from there I kind of was elected president, and it kind of snowballed into like all of this now. And so I would say also having meetings that happen more than once a year is pretty important too, because yeah, that's what was happening in Sugar Hill. They would meet like once a year for the elections, and that was it. So you can't really have any participation if the group's not meeting often. So yeah, that was key. I think we changed it to once every 2 months, but like since then, I think we've increased it to once a month, right, Sergio? Um, Something like that. But yeah, doing those neighborhood projects is important. And, like my mural in the Bronx Wash, uh, very Sugar Hill focused. It features my relatives who have since passed. It has like, the Northwest Center thing, the map has Sugar Hill front and center, and also just some motifs that are like personal to me, like the fish bones and everything like that, which is I'm not going to go into the back history of the fish bones, but let's just say that the Northwest Center used to serve a catfish often, and a lot of neighborhood residents would, take some of the catfish from the center. Anyways, I'm not going to go too much into that because I don't want to get people in trouble. But yeah, I think, I look on Facebook and I always see like people posing in front of my mural all the time, because I think it harkens back to the good old days when like we had more of a presence in Sugar Hill. And my mural isn't the only like Sugar Hill centric mural, but I think because I'm like from the neighborhood, it seems more authentic, even though like the style is rather naive compared to some of the other murals there. But yeah, another project I think that is really important to do, that should be led by a historic resident, is an oral history project. As most of you know, I did like the Sugar Hill Oral History Project, recording some oral histories from the historic residents. And that was really important to me, and to, I think, a lot of people, because, we're losing our elders all the time. And I wasn't able to record any of my own family's oral histories, but like to do it for other people, I know it means a lot to them and the neighborhood in general. One woman who I recorded, Miss Dillon, she has since passed away, and she was a really important person in the neighborhood. She was one of the first in the neighborhood. Actually, she's on the El Cortez side. But yeah, like her story, she talks about white flight and all kinds of things. She worked at St. Mary's for like 40 years, so she has a lot of history. And she helped, of course, get sidewalks in El Cortez and street lights. And she also helped start the center with a bunch of other neighbors too. So I think it's important to like archive that history. And since then, I've had a lot of other neighborhoods reach out to me about doing their own oral history project. And I tell them the same thing, like, you know, having it be led by a person who like is connected in some way, not just like some random person who, you know, is well-meaning and might be new to the neighborhood, but like it's just more authentic to have it be like someone who has a family connection. Let's see. Also, you know, sometimes we have to realize that neighborhood associations can only go so far. And especially when you consider like political power for people who have a connection but might not necessarily be within the neighborhood anymore. And you know, I resonate with that a lot because you know, I was evicted from Sugar Hill a couple summers ago, and so you know, not being able to really vote for anything anymore at the neighborhood association level, and you know, being a voice still, but lacking that real political power, I think is important because like a lot of people are displaced from Sugar Hill now, but we care about the neighborhood. You know, over the years, we have had people who, like me, are displaced, but they want to have like serve as officers in the neighborhood association. But of course, you know, the bylaws of the city prevent that. And we even tried to change that in Sugar Hill Neighborhood Association, but the city told us that we can't do that. So to combat that, one way that we're doing it now is to create the land trust. And so the land trust, Sugar Hill Community Land Trust, is to kind of build Black spaces, wealth, and buy back the land in Sugar Hill so that we could kind of steward it and, you know, get back into the neighborhood by any means necessary. And luckily, with the help of some of the current residents and some residents that are in the surrounding neighborhoods, we have been pretty successful, and we, you know, won a grant from the community food bank. And we are right now giving away COVID relief grants to some of the current and displaced residents of Sugar Hill neighborhood. This is my daughter, Salome. Say hi. Hi. Yeah, so I think it's okay. So yeah, I think, you know, we have to be creative in how we reach out to historic residents. You know, don't just stop at the neighborhood association, you know, see what they want to do, even if they like, you know, don't want to participate in the neighborhood association meetings. They might want to initiate like an art project or, you know, an oral history project, or, you know, something even bigger like a land trust. Yeah, and of course, you know, making space for them too is important, because not everyone's going to be comfortable at first participating. I know that, like me, I was really actually afraid to be president of the neighborhood association because I didn't know, and I still don't know really, Robert's Rules of Order, which is how we conduct neighborhood association meetings. And you know, I really wish I would have studied them more during my term, because of course the TUSD board meetings, we use Robert's rules, but I'm starting to get the hang of it a little bit. But, you know, being flexible to like the way that we conduct meetings. And also, one thing I'm proud of is that, like, I think like a year or so into my presidency, like we realized that, well, I always felt this way, but thinking about the people that you invite to the neighborhood association meetings and how they might inhibit or um, turn away some historic residents. I'm speaking specifically about the police departments who often came to our neighborhood association meetings. And, we had some neighbors who came, and like at the end, I spoke to one of them, and he told me that like he was very uncomfortable with the police officer being there, and he was like staring him down and making him feel like a criminal in his own space. And so from that moment on, well, I guess I told like the rest of the neighborhood association that we wouldn't be welcoming the police department at our meetings anymore. And I'm happy to say that the new president, Sergio, has also honored that tradition, because they've done a lot of harm in the neighborhood for sure. And you could also compare that to the block parties that Sugar Hill Coalition threw at the park. There was a strong police presence at the block parties, very strong police presence. And you compare that to that little like bluesy thing that happened in Feldman's neighborhood a few times. There were no police there. And so, it's like a black thing. Of course, Sugar Hill, there's a lot more white residents there now, but if there's anything that's like black centered in the neighborhood, the police will show up, and it just, exhibits the like disparity, I guess, in Tucson. And so like being cognizant of when you get your historic residents, whether they be Black, Latino, Indigenous, or what have you, I think is important, because making the space comfortable will increase the participation. Yeah, and I think really, in general, just having some people in leadership who represent them will also increase the participation too. Um, yeah, and I know that, me being the president really helps that. And I think Sergio is doing a great job as president too. Um, I think Zoom too is really a turnoff to a lot of like older historic residents. And so I know that the new president has had a couple meetings in person, and that speaks to people as well. Also, just having a leader that looks like the people of the neighborhood is important. Okay, thank you. And I can answer questions too if anyone has any.
Thank you, Sadie, for sharing your experiences and ideas and suggestions. And yes, if anyone has any questions for Sadie or any other presenters, please put them in the chat. Because of time, we prefer that you put it in the chat. And Sadie, if you want to drop your email into the chat so that people can communicate to you directly, that would also be very helpful. I'd like to introduce Josue Aparicio, representing Maximum Management Corporation. When we were designing this session, I talked to Barbara Eisworth of East Cachita for some ideas, and she suggested talk to Josue, and it made instant sense. Talk to someone who is affiliated with apartments. There's so many apartments in our city. So Josue, share with us some of your perspective, how neighborhood associations can reach residents in the apartment. Thank you.
Thank you for the invite again. Based on from my experience, I've been doing this for just about 20 years. And when I came to Tucson back in 2003, so I've been here almost 20 years, we started the Met3 Alliance. with Dodge Flower and uh, a neighborhood association and a coalition of a few of the neighborhood associations in the area, and that was with the TPD involvement really strongly. The police department helped with that. Uh, what it is it's a community effort. You know, at the end, if you want to get done in your community, you got to get involved with different agencies, not to mention government, non-government, also private, like the communities, apartments, and that's been my experience. That's where I started a little organizing and bring to the table that our neighborhoods can be safer if we try a few strategies that work, especially the workshop that Tucson Police Department offers, a crime-free multi-housing workshops that right now it's obviously in pieces. I don't know. I haven't really been involved since last year. Last year I was supposed to have a few of my managers at those workshops, and they work. They do work, knowing which tenants are engaging in criminal activities, how to screen your tenants more accurately, specifically if you're looking for folks that have background, a recurrency background of criminal activities. So we don't want the crime in our neighborhoods, period. In order to do that, and from my experience, it was several agencies, government, non-government, private, and just pass the word with flyers. I know that the word offices send flyers uh, to most um, residents in the area. But I noticed that not everybody gets them, or they don't get involved due to and this is very common here in Tucson. Most of the folks that live in our neighborhood, they're not homeowners. So that sense of ownership with the rental tenants is just non-existent, based on the fact that specifically where I have right now about 3 buildings in a very critical area, which is Prince and Stone, right where the it's Amphi, and I have 3 buildings there, and it's just the homeless epidemic. It's all over. I mean, you want to be empathetic to their cause, but also they're entitled and they think they deserve everything. They think they can squat on our units, uh, and that's not acceptable. That's not how we engage in a friendly neighborhood. Uh, Also, well, one of the other items is that you gotta create, neighborhood, or not necessarily neighborhood, community, or building community, or community building events, like let's pick up trash in our block. Let's volunteer at this particular food bank in our neighborhood, or let's help out the folks that in your neighborhood that are struggling with paying rent. Make sure they do a little potluck for them. So it takes a diverse you know items that you have to engage in order to get this done, in order to bring your neighbors, especially if you have tenants, involved. And not only that, TPD always mention other workshops that our property managers in some way have more influence with our tenants, for them to, be more proactive, not to litter the area where they live, be more friendly, and, and a few of those little cues that you gotta talk to your resident manager. I advise every tenant that if you guys want to engage in making your neighborhood better, and cleaner, have less crime, we also we have to start with every single unit in every single home in our neighborhood, and bring that awareness about uh, you know uh, making it safer for our children specifically, uh, much more productive, uh, have that sense of pride and ownership of our neighborhood. Because a lot of the folks that want to move in any of those buildings in that area in particular, they're folks that that's all I can afford. This is the neighborhood that I end up because of my crappy job or my crappy credit or my criminal background. But in some sense, I disagree. That those are just excuses, and I know that a lot of folks make a 180 degree uh, turn and change your lives, and just be friendly and be empathetic to the cause of having a nice, safe, clean, friendly neighborhood. It takes that personal approach, that good leadership, from a resident manager, and lead by example. And that's what we try with all our resident managers, to lead by example. Make sure they confront any negative behavior, any non-compliances. And because if you don't, folks will just do whatever they want. It's a given. It's how it is, and that's what I learned. And TPD does help. TPD does help. I know that they can have some bad reputation in some areas, but they help. They help. They're friendly. They do engage in the community, and they want to know about your issues, and what's happening, where the crime is, who's selling what, who's doing what in their apartment. So I do feel that from my experience is any resident manager or homeowner in your neighborhood must contact the Tucson Police Department about what's going on in the neighborhood. If there is a neighborhood watch getting organized, where are the meetings getting organized? Nowadays it's Zoom, so obviously for some folks it's difficult, but you know what we got. But getting organized does work, make a better neighborhood in cooperation with the police, with non-government agencies like Ishkashida, like churches throughout our neighborhood, and private institutes, and getting everybody on the same page helps a lot. Um, and that's been my experience so far. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
All right. Thank you, Josue. We appreciate it. I will think just because of time, we'll, put some questions in the chat if anybody has any. Uh, so thank you so much. So our next presenter and final is Nicole Snook from the Flowing Halls Estates Neighborhood Watch. Nicole, if you want to go ahead and take it away.
I have one thing to share on the screen.
Okay, you should be a co-host, so you should have that ability.
Okay. I'm also sharing the link in the chat if somebody wants to keep it. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to present again. I am here I was asked to talk about mobile home residents and how to involve our mobile home residents in our neighborhood watch. So I represent a neighborhood watch, not a neighborhood association. So it's a much smaller scale. And we have our particular neighborhood is surrounded by trailer parks, and then it also houses a trailer park within the neighborhood. And so we don't have, we have one mobile home community, but it isn't, to me, a community has like a pool and a clubhouse. that sort of thing. And I know that not all apartment complexes have that, let alone mobile home parks here in Tucson. So there's a very diverse group of definition of what mobile home parks are. In my area, and what I'm going to be addressing are spaces that are rented by trailers, whether the owner of it, the person who lives in the trailer is an owner or a renter. We have both. So we have if you're familiar with the area, we're off Prince and Flowing Wells, and we have the Flamingo Palms, which is right across from Flowing Wells High School. There's a beautiful Floridian colored mural on their wall out front. We have the Shady Lane Trailer Park, which is a small community to the west of us. We have unnamed park that is about 12 trailers off of Kilbourne. And then we don't include the trailer parks that are on Flowing Wells further south of us because we can't see them. So I just wanted to let you know that I believe Ernesto said that in my little blurb about what I would be talking about is that it's difficult to engage residents and communities in mobile home communities, but it's not impossible. And whew, has it been hard? I'm not gonna lie, it's been difficult. And I don't necessarily know why. I can't pinpoint it other than to say that there's a lot of standoffishness, there is fear, there's a lot of reclusiveness that we see, and then there are a lot of people who, not because I am looking at them a certain way, but maybe feel that they are looked as them or the other. And so whenever I approach a group, I come with a we attitude. We are the community. We are in this together. We are, this neighborhood. We are Tucson. We are, and broader and Ward 3, et cetera, Pima County, et cetera. And, but in our little niche at Flowing Wells and Prince, we are that community and we have to live here and we want it safe, clean, and friendly. And it kind of catches people off guard because they think that maybe I'm coming in to say, oh, shame on you, this doesn't look right, or oh, shame on you, this isn't clean, or this isn't the way it's supposed to be. And that's not how I approach this. I look at our community and everybody who lives here as assets to our community. Everybody brings something to the table. And sometimes it takes recognition of that for them to feel that spark within themselves that, yes, I do belong here. And yes, I do have something to bring to the table. So everybody who has presented has talked about all sorts of groups to include, but and think about what is the bottom line. I liked the first presenter talking about, are we there to just check a box and say, yes, we have this person of color who's female in a wheelchair and happens to be gay at the table? That's not what we're trying to do. We want to have everybody recognized and have a voice. And one of the things that I tend to take a survey of when I'm at a community meeting is who is not represented, who's missing. And that's where I'm checking boxes in my head. And I'm very proud to say that our Neighborhood Watch represents three languages that I'm aware of. I don't know everybody, but in the neighborhood, but it represents 3 languages. Our oldest resident is 94 years old. There are veterans, there are young people, there are immigrants, there are different religions represented on my street, let alone in the neighborhood that we represent. There's people with mental challenges, physical challenges, learning challenges. There is a group home here for adult males who are wards of the state. And we engage the owner of that home and so that she can, you know, support her residents. So I, as with the presenter who was right before me, Josue, talking about the apartment complexes, I know trailer parks and mobile home communities are a much smaller scale, but one of the best ways that I have found when I'm not getting engagement is to go to the owner of the park, not the manager. For some reason, my experience has been, until lately, that the manager feels like I'm stepping on toes. We have a we have a good relationship with one manager at one of the parks, but I don't have a good relationship with the managers at the other two. And so I have reached out to the owners because I feel like if it's not going to be a grassroots level, like here, we want to organize your little community to be a community and then be part of our community as a whole. I need to go to the owner. And the problem with that is that a lot of times the owners are out of town. And so it does take a little bit of research and putting a letter together and getting a stamp and waiting for the mail and hoping for a reply, but it does work. And I think, but I'm also a person that takes, I'm not going to just talk the talk, I'm going to walk the walk. So I follow up. So for example, just recently with one of the mobile home parks that we're trying to re-engage in our community watch, the owner had a long conversation with me. He lives in San Diego, and I asked him if it would be okay for me to produce a survey for his residents. And he said, yes, and just give it to the manager and he'll hand it out with the rent notices. I said, okay. Have I heard back? No. Did I follow up today before this meeting to see if I would get a response? I did, but I haven't gotten a response yet. I was hoping to bring some good news to the table, but it's follow up. It's just allowing everybody to know we're here. We're going to do this whether you're a part of it or not. And we're going to watch your community just as much as we're going to watch our community. And we would hope that you would do the same. If my child was running in the parking lot in your community and not looking at cars that possibly are going through, I would hope you would say, hey, come over here, get out of the street. Just like I would say to your child, hey, there's a car coming, get off to the side, because we're all looking out for each other. It doesn't matter where we live. And so I have things on the slide here that feel free to, you know, modify, add to, delete. How I've done direct contact with residents and indirect. But I got to tell you, and I believe Ernesto and Matt, and if Sarah's here also could speak to word of mouth about our group in particular. So like I said, we are part of the Flowing Wells Neighborhood Coalition, but we are a neighborhood watch. And we've gotten a lot done just as a neighborhood watch that doesn't even involve the neighborhood coalition. And so sometimes smaller is better. And that's all I have for right now. And I'm happy to take questions at the end or in the chat as well. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. All right, I think we generally try to keep these to an hour, so we're over a little bit, but I'd be happy to you know, facilitate a couple questions if people have them before we sign off. Perfect. Thanks, Nicole. Sorry, I was trying to get back to gallery view. Sorry everyone. But yeah, if anybody has any questions, go ahead and raise your hand physically or that raise hand option, and I can call on you.
Well, there's one question in the chat for Nicole. Nicole, how does your work, how is it being impacted by the growing houselessness and lack of housing affordability and housing in the region?
So I know Habitat. I don't know if there's a representative here from Habitat who happens to just be part of the group. But Habitat for Humanity and the U of A recently did they had a grant to do some networking in the mobile home parks in and around the 85705 area in the Flowing Wells area. And I don't know what the results of their project was. As far as our homeless population, we have our known areas where the homeless camp out in our neighborhood. And then we have an area that we have cleaned up and sort of made it off limits. It's a public space. It's not an alley. It's not behind a building. It's a public space. And we've been, knock on wood, successful in keeping it clean, trimmed, etc. Fences repaired so that there's quick action to the area to know, like, if you're going to break through your fence, it's going to get fixed tomorrow. If you're going to leave a mattress here, it's going to get picked up tomorrow. It's that sort of thing in this public area. As far as the smaller camps, we do not report them, especially right now, because of the houselessness situation that we're currently facing. But in the past we have, because they're in the area that I'm talking about, that is a public area, because children would walk to and from school there. And there were people there that we didn't know may have been recently released from jail, doing drugs, a violent criminal. We didn't know, and we needed to make it safer for our children. So we did report that.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Is there any other, maybe one more question if there is one? All right. If not, then I thank you all for coming. And I am at the bottom of your agenda that I sent out at the beginning of the meeting, but I'll re-emphasize it right now. We are excited to announce season 2 of the Ward 3 information series. We're going to be having 2 upcoming sessions. One on the first one, which is on March 18th, is going to be hosted by Tucson Clean and Beautiful to talk about some neighborhood scale green stormwater infrastructure. And then the next session is going to be April 1st with the Transportation Department to talk about neighborhood traffic calming. So if you're interested, go ahead and sign up. The link is included at the bottom of your agenda. And thank you everybody for making this session as well as season 1 of the Ward 3 Neighborhood Series so great. Thank you all for taking the time. Many of you have been attendees, you've been presenters, and we very much appreciate it. So thank you all. And with that, take care and have a good night.
All right. Thank you, everyone.